Howdy, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 820 support tier list. So, as always, you can find timestamps in the description if you want to jump around to your favorite parts. You can also find access to this Google Doc in the description as well. And in this Google Doc, you can find links to my recommendations for runes, items, a link to the champion's abilities, and a simple 1 to 5 rating scale for a few of the different things that champions do. So 1 means the champion is one of the worst at the position at whatever that task is. 5 means the champion is one of the best at that position for that task. So lane pressure is just how likely is the champion able to get lane priority, to push the lane, to exert their will on the lane. Kill threat, how likely is the champion able to get a kill during the laning phase. Safety, how safe is the champion from ganks, from dying in the early game, and then how safe are they in terms of positioning as the game goes on. Scaling is how well does the champion perform over time, and then reliability is twofold. 1 is how difficult is the champion to play, sort of mechanically and decision-making wise, and then also how easy is the champion to counter in the current meta. Are there lots of picks that are good against it? Is it bad against certain picks that are out there? Is it bad with certain team comps that are popular for your team? So how does it fit in? How likely is it that the champion is going to get played at an optimal level in your games? Okay, and as I always say, this is intended for a Plat minus audience, so it can still be useful in the Diamond level, and, it'll still be useful down in Bronze, but it's really kind of aimed towards sort of that Gold, Platinum, maybe Silver kind of audience, and then that's going to make it a bit different from things like Challenger level streams or pro games. And a big part of this that I explain a lot on the stream is those types of games are very low gold economy games. That's why champions like Tahm Kench and Braum are so popular in Challenger and pro games, because they operate very well on a no gold economy. Hey Jorge, thanks for the sub. I really appreciate it. So, if there's only going to be 10 kills in a game, then having a champion that operates really well on like 0 gold, like Tahm Kench, where you don't need any items, he just does what he does. He has his ultimate, he can eat people with his W, he doesn't need any scaling. That's going to be a lot more useful there than in like a silver game where there might be 60 kills in a game, where routinely the support's going to get 4 or 5 items, and in that case scaling is going to matter a lot more. And so champions like Rakan are going to be a lot stronger. Champions like Sona are going to be a lot stronger. Now Rakan is also really strong in Challenger level play, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So it's a Plat minus audience intended for non-specialists, non-one tricks, and then I look at stats, but we also look at the potential power of a champion, right? So some of the champions up near the top that I'm going to rank highly, like Rakan, like Pyke, are not going to have the greatest win rates, right? They're going to be about 49–50%, but a lot of that is because they're much harder to play than a lot of the other supports that'll be on the list. So that means that a lot of people that try to play them don't have a lot of practice with them, and they're not going to perform that well. So I look at the potential power, how well can a champion be played when played to its fullest, but then also I look at popularity and stats. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. All right, number 1, I think it's Rakan. He's been floating around in tier 1 for a while now, just sort of bouncing around depending on which position it is. But recently I started trying out the more popular build with Guardian. So Guardian, Boneplating, Chrysalis, Revitalize, the Nimbus Cloak, and Celerity. And then you take 3 points of Q in lane, and then after that you max your shield, and then you would max your W last. And so I've sort of changed this up. I started looking at this website, which is pretty helpful, called League of Graphs. They're not sponsoring the video or anything. But League of Graphs, and it'll show you sort of the top ranked players for whichever champion you want. And you can go through and look at their games. So it's kind of like pro builds, but you can get a bit more depth on it, and you can see like people that specialize in one trick in the champion. So pro builds is great, and I do use this, but you don't really know which people put a lot of time in on those champions. Like, you'll know Gorilla probably knows what he's talking about, right, when he's doing support. But other people, they get auto-filled there. For example, like Froggen. I mean, I guess Froggen's playing Lulu mid lane in this one, but it just lets you know like what some of the highest ranked, like best one tricks for whatever that champion is are building. And so I went there, I looked. I tried out, this is what the top couple of people were building all the time, which is Guardian, Bowplating, Chrysalis, Revitalize. and it's been working very, very well. So a big thing about Rakan, and then of course rushing Zeke's, which has always been standard, but now I've switched over to going Knight's Vow second, and you'll see this in a lot of the top builds here, is this combination right here is extremely powerful. And so the reason for this, people kind of know why Zeke's is powerful, but it basically, let me pull it up here. This item has become sort of the go-to item, especially after the nerf to Redemption, Mikhail's, Ardent Sensor. You know, all that stuff has been nerfed quite a bit over the last year or so. And that has solidified Zeke's as a really powerful choice for quite a while. They also buffed Zeke's at some point. I think it was this season. It was the end of last season. Okay, so they reduced the cost. And they buff the amount of damage that it does. So basically, this item is cost efficient by itself, right? It's 102% gold efficient. But this active is so powerful. You know, it activates every time you use your ult. So champions have a short cooldown can use this a lot better than champions with longer cooldowns. But it basically gives your AD carry an extra 25% damage for 10 seconds is how you want to think of it. So they do an extra 50% bonus magic damage over 2 seconds, and it ticks for 1 or 25% per second. So it's effectively, you know, 25% extra damage. That is huge. That doesn't scale by level. So unlike Ardent Sensor, where they've changed it to, you know, this really low amount at early levels, you know, 10% extra attack speed, 5 on-hit bonus damage, where it used to do a flat, like, I think it used to be 25-25. It might have been 20-20. But either way, it used to be a lot more than that. Yeah, bonus attack speed, 20% to 35, 20 to 35. So it was a flat 20 to start and went up from there. And so this has been nerfed quite a bit over time. Now, the base stats on something like Ardent Sensor are going to be stronger. It's 121% base. So, like, the really good cases for Ardent Sensor are still really good. Like, Ardent Sensor is still a great item. But the thing about Zeke's is it's so powerful on single item, and it gives you just a lot of survivability. Like, all of these stats are just great for a single item. So the plus 250 mana is a really big deal because a lot of these champions, a lot of the tank type of champions are going to have fairly low mana pools, and they're going to have low regeneration rates. And it also gives you that nice 60 armor, 30 magic resist, so great resistance is there. And then the 10% CDR, which is huge on tanks especially. So yeah, this item's just fantastic. It also, like, this slow is very underrated. If your AD carry auto attacks while you're in range of this, while you're giving them this little 20% slow, it turns into a 40% slow for 3 seconds. No diminishing returns. So if you get anywhere close to somebody, they're going to be slowed by 40%, even if they try to flash out of range of you for an additional 3 seconds, which is pretty insane. And it can do up to 400 magic or 40 magic damage per second, which can be up to 400 damage. That's more than a lot of ultimates. So it can do ultimate level damage. It slows everyone around you for 40% for 3 seconds if you're in close. Or if you're in Rakan's case, you go in, they auto attack, you trigger this slow, and then you can jump back out. They're still going to be slowed for 3 seconds, even if you dash back out of there. And they get to do 50% bonus magic damage. And it has really good components with Glacial Shroud and Aegis of the Legion. And its, like, base stats are already 102% efficient. So this item's just crazy. Like, anything that can use this item should be running it. Especially in solo queues. Really, really powerful item. So that's part of why, you know, champions like Rakan have been getting a lot more powerful lately. And then Knight's Vow is also something that I've been getting increasingly a lot more. And on Rakan, I used to get things like Redemption is okay, but it's a little awkward because you definitely want Zeke's first. And so in a lot of games, you're not going to be able to get any extra plus healing and shielding to go with your Redemption. Because you're just not going to have space. You know, you're going to be able to complete, like, usually you can get, like, 2 support items, get your, then you complete your 4 ward item, and you're buying a lot of control wards. You know, you're buying, like, maybe 10 to 15 control wards per game. You got to get your tier 2 boots, and by then a lot of games are over. And so it's really hard to get, like, you might get a third item in there. So you might be able to add on a little bit. But, you know, it's rough to get another item. And so that means that redemption doesn't really scale that well because you're not getting another plus healing and shielding item. And, what are your other options? I mean, sometimes people go Shirelia's, which is okay. I mean, that does boost you in. That lets you get into the fight. So Shirelia's was very, very good on Rakan until they nerfed it. But it's still pretty good. You know, it's 110 base efficiency. It does give you some nice stuff. You get the ability power, cooldown reduction, health. Base mana regen is okay. It's not amazing on Rakan because you're already going to have some mana regen off of your Zeeks, but it's okay. So it's like 500 golds of like, okay stuff. You know, and you get the 5% movement speed, which is, of course, very good on him. So you can speed everyone in for 40%. This is very good with Celerity, which has been nerfed several times, but it's still okay on Rakan. But this is an acceptable item. You're just going to be a lot less tanky. It does have the health on it, but it doesn't have the armor. So it gives you ability power, but no armor. So that's an okay option on Rakan as well. Another option would be something like... I need to put Shirley's on there. You know, Ardent Sensor, you know, as we talked about before, can be very good. Now, the thing is, if your AD carry is really fed, then you can get Ardent Sensor plus Zeeks, which is a great combination because this is going to give them that extra attack speed so they can hit even more while they're empowered with the Zeeks. And then it's going to give additional on-hit damage. So, Ardent Sensor plus Zeeks, if you can get away with it, is really, really strong. If you have that, you know, 5-0 Kaisa on your team or something, this might be a good item to get. Now, keep in mind that you're going to be a lot squishier if you get Ardent Sensor, so that would be a good option. Maybe if they're low on damage, if they don't have assassins, they just have like 3 tanks or something like that. This might be a pretty decent option. So that's another one that's, you know, potentially on the table. Locket is okay, and I have gotten Locket some in the past after Zeeks, but the problem with that is you don't have any bonus health off of Zeeks, and you don't get any bonus health off of Nomad's Medallion, so that means that your Locket scaling is going to be kind of low. Locket also doesn't have any CDR on it, and you really, really want CDR as Rakan and as a lot of these tanks that we're going to talk about to start with, and so that's really rough. So it doesn't have any health on it, doesn't have any CDR, has relatively weak scaling because your first item's not going to have any health on it, and you're going to be getting it at still a fairly low level if you get it as your second item. The components are kind of pesky to get. So if you are going to get Locket, I would get it if you are team fighting, and I would get it after you already have Zeeks plus Knight's Vow. Now, getting back to Knight's Vow, why I've been rushing this second, why a lot of people are getting it second. Yes, you do only get half the benefit, right? It's only 6% damage block and 6% healing. But it still is 60 armor. It's a 60 armor item that gives 250 health and 10% cooldown reduction. So it's almost the same thing as Zeke's, right? Just instead of magic resist, it now gives you flat health. Now, this flat health is very nice because if you do decide to get Locket later on, it will give you the health to help scale that. But also because you'll go Guardian, which is really popular on Rakan right now, then this will give you some extra scaling with Guardian as well off of the health. And that extra movement speed is really nice. You know, whenever you dive in as Rakan, a lot of times you're trying to run back to your partner anyways, so that you can E away and get out of there before they CC and kill you. So being able to run towards your partner is a big deal. Or if you're trying to catch up to your partner, if things are getting weird, you know, if they're getting caught out in this Clown Fiesta and you're running from one side of the map to the other, you get that extra 15% movement speed when you're running towards them. You know, that can be really handy. So I think that because Rakan jumps around and tries to run back to his partner quite a lot, then that is pretty handy. And, you know, 6% damage mitigation and 6% healing is still a big deal. I mean, that definitely adds up in fights. And so I think that's part of what makes him, you know, really strong, is it helps protect your carry. It gives you the extra movement speed, armor, health. You know, almost most importantly, it's another 2200 item that has CDR on it that gives you sort of tanky. So I think that's very handy on him still. Yeah, I think we mentioned these other ones. One kind of odd one is Mikhail's, which I have been finding myself getting this a decent amount kind of in the end game. If we have, like, as my third item, it doesn't require anything else to scale with it. And just having that cleanse effect is very powerful against a lot of things in the game, right? So against things like Ash Arrow, Thresh Hooks, Lux Binds, Morg Binds, all of these things, it's really nice to have that extra cleanse effect. Because after you have Zeke's and Knight's Vow, you really don't need that much more tankiness. Like, it's nice to have extra tankiness, but sometimes just being able to cleanse that, you know, your LeBlanc keeps getting hit by Morg Binds or something like that. Sometimes it's nice to be able to cleanse that up. So yeah, Mikhail's is another option that's okay in the end game, especially if the enemy has a lot of CC. So yeah, I think that Rakan's great right now. I mean, he provides pretty decent lane pressure early on. He has the best engage in the game. He scales really well. As you can see, he's super versatile with all of his items. And I think going for kind of this more popular build of Guardian plus Nimbus Cloak build with 3 points of Q in lane gives you that extra pressure to help you get into the mid game. And then going for this Knight's Vow gives you an extra bit of durability as well. So, excellent champ, excellent build. I think he's super strong right now, both in the professional scene and in solo queue at all ELO levels. I mean, one thing that's unique about Rakan that I talk about a lot is that he can not only go in, but he can also get out. So he's one of the only champs on this list who can go in with his full rotation, right? You just do R plus W to go in, then you can E and dash right back out. So if your team doesn't follow up, you know, the worst case scenario a lot of times is, okay, you have to wait on your ult again. You lose your ult cooldown. But at least you're not going to lose your life, you know, and you can still do stuff, you know, even when you don't have your ult. Like if you try to go in and then they don't fight, and then it's like 20 seconds later your team's going in again, you have some other kind of initiate, you got a Vi or something like that, you can still go in there and do stuff, right? Like you can still, you know, E in and then follow up with your W on another engage. So he's still very relevant even when his ult's on cooldown. Obviously it's better if it's not on cooldown, but I'm just saying that like the worst case scenario for him a lot of times when you engage ends up getting mitigated. So, and you know, against really heavy CC, if they have something like a Veigar or a Malzahar or whatever, you can actually get a Quicksilver Sash fairly early on as well. It doesn't feel great to have to do that, but sometimes you have to pay the Quicksilver Sash tax. So, that's really one of his only weaknesses is against like point-click CC. A lot of times, you know, like Fiddlestick's Fear, Malzahar ults, Lissandra ults, Vi ults, you know, things like that. That can potentially lock him down, can be problematic. But if you can navigate your way around that, then he's very strong. He's very good at dodging other things, though. He's very good at dodging hooks. So, you know, evading things like Pyke, Thresh. He's very, very good at that, if played correctly. So, I think he's just really, really strong. Scales well. He has great ratios. I mean, if we look at his stuff here, fantastic ratios on his AP. Now, you're not going to be getting a lot of AP, obviously, but if you do want to get something like an Ardent Sensor down the line, or you do want to get a Shirelia's in your build and you think it makes sense, he does have awesome scaling on AP, and that's part of what makes him so versatile. You know, he's got a 0.9 on his passive, which is crazy, which, I mean, by the way, his trading in lane is really good if you think about it, because you've got Guardian, which is up, you know, every 30 to 40 seconds in the laning phase. That's a free trade. And then you've got this Fae Feathers, which is up every, you know, usually every 30 seconds or so. That's a free trade. Extra little shield. Anytime he hits somebody with a Q, he's going to heal. I mean, this is pretty decent. It's 60 mana the whole time. If you get 3 points in lane, it's 160 damage, and it heals for a decent amount, and heals all of your allies around you for this number plus 0.7. Which is quite a bit, especially like if you're doing Baron or something like that. You know, you can heal your whole team. You can heal like 4 people every time this is up if everyone's kind of grouped up. So it's not just the 2 people. It's anyone that's in that little area when you do it. So usually it's 2, but there are some circumstances where it could be more. So yeah, It's really nice ratios on a lot of things. So it's just another just bonus perk that's not always relevant, but is nice. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about Rakan here, or Pyke here, rather, a little bit. Now, Pyke has been rocketing up the list for a while now. He doesn't have a super strong win rate overall. He's only 50%, but he's still very strong. There's a lot of people that just are not good on this champion, but in the right hands, he can be very, very good. He's the second most banned support right now. Very frustrating to play against. He did get a buff last patch where he gets an extra 50 damage on his execute level 1, which is insane. So, yeah, he does a lot of execute damage. Let me see if I can pull him up here. I don't know if it's going to let us grab him or not. Sometimes this website's kind of squirrely. Okay, it's going to give it to us today. Good. The main thing that makes Pyke really good, though, I mean, obviously his ultimate, you know, is something that people notice. It's great. It gives you a lot of extra gold. The extra execution, like, is a big deal. Like, sometimes you're just kind of KSing to get this, which is okay because your ally's still going to get all of the gold. You're actually generating more gold for your team if you do KS with this. But, you know, being able to execute for that 250 is a big deal. Like, sometimes just getting somebody over the line, you know. And 250, basically true damage, even better than true damage because it eats through shields, is tremendous. I mean, at level 6, how much HP is the AD carry going to have? Like, maybe 1,000? You know, this is like 25% of their health where you can execute them. So, it's very nice, particularly in squishy targets, and there are a lot of squishy targets out there. But one thing that people often underestimate who don't play Pyke a lot is this healing. The healing on his passive is absolutely nuts. There's no cooldown on it. And it just feels like it heals like almost all of the damage back. There are percentages. It doesn't actually heal all of the damage, but it just feels like it heals a lot, especially with Revitalize, which triggers this. Or like this healing with Revitalize. Revitalize interacts with this, I should say. So it's really, really nice. And so this is why tank Pyke, because I get asked sometimes, why are people building tank Pyke? This is it. This is the reason. Is because your trading pattern is typically you go for the hook, you hook somebody, then you E in, right? So you hook them, stun them, and then you're going to get hit, you know, by a lot of stuff. And so you have Aftershock to help you soften that up a little bit. And you're going to have other items like Frozen Heart, like Spirit Visage. And then when you W and run back out of the fight for a little bit, you'll heal almost all of that up, that damage that you just got, and then you go back in, and you can add more CC in there. So that's really why he's good. If you go AD, his AD ratios aren't amazing. If you look at it, his Ghost Water Dive basically has no ratio. It's very low. You know, and he has long cooldowns on his abilities, right? So this does go down to 8 seconds, but it's only got a 0.6, you know, AD ratio, which is not a lot. This Phantom Undertow does have a pretty good ratio, right? But it's on a 15-second cooldown. Death from Below. Now, this is nice because, you know, the AD ratio on his ult is good, because that is execute damage. That's very, very good. But, you know, just not insane in terms of AD. Yeah, so I guess you have a little bit of scaling. But it's not really that much. Like, his abilities don't have insanely high base damage. They don't have, like, super high scaling. I mean, the base damage on this is pretty low. It's like 215. And lethality isn't as strong on him as people think it is. It's okay, like with the Dustblade, Ghostblade build, right? So it's gonna, like, your baseline abilities are gonna do some more damage, but once again, the damage itself, not that high. It's okay. And lethality doesn't do anything on Death from Below, because it bypasses all armor. It's just an execute. And this is sort of his signature move, what he's known for, right? This is where a lot of his damage comes in, and it's not really affected by lethality. And so that's why going like the Dustblade, Ghostblade build is not really that great. It's like, it feels like it should be, because he's like an assassin, but if you actually look at his numbers really aren't that high for assassins. If you compare him, like, to something like Talon or Zed, very, very low damage compared to some of them. And so this is why the tank build is really good, because the lethality build is like, okay, but the tank build allows you. He does have good CC, so you know you want a lot of CDR, and you want to be able to survive when you go in for these engages. So, because if you try to E into the enemy team and you're just like glass cannon and you have like no resistances, they're just gonna blow you up like almost instantly. If you try to go for something like, you know, electrocute lethality build on him. So that's part of why this build has become very popular. And so you just go Aftershock, Bone Plating, Chrysalis, Revitalize, and then Perfect Timing and Cosmic Insight. And you'll be very, very effective. So just Mobility Boots, obviously, helps you zip around the map, helps you, you know, land your E. Nomad's Medallion. Then Frozen Heart has been the new technology that a lot of people have gotten with him. The problem with getting a lot of the traditional tank items is that health doesn't actually make you tankier. It just converts over to AD. So that's kind of weird. And then also, like, Zeke's isn't amazing on him. It's okay, but, like, you're usually holding your ult, you know, to execute people. And so Zeke's isn't that useful. Like, Zeke's, you want to be using Zeke's on a champion where you're starting a fight and you can hold them still, right? So something like Rakan, right? So you're starting a fight, you're ulting them, you know, you're holding people still. And that's not really the case with Pyke. You want to be holding onto that ult until you're executing, right? And so this is where Frozen Heart comes in. So Frozen Heart is a very efficient item. If you haven't played the game, you know, for a really long time, you may not be as familiar with Frozen Heart. Hey, thanks for the sub, Gonzalo. I appreciate it. If you haven't been playing League for a long time, then you may not remember this item. But this item was like the go-to item for like 5 or 6 seasons of League. Like every support always bought Frozen Heart and then Locket or Bulwark or whatever it was called. Aegis of the Legion. It was always these 2 items. You would just get the 2 aura items and that was pretty much it. That's why tanks have ruled the seas for such a long time as supports. It was only recently with the introduction of plus healing and shielding that you started to see champions like you know, Janna and things like that really start to become over the top. Like, Janna's always been okay, but she would be getting things like Frozen Heart and Aegis of the Legion, right? And that stuff's just better on tanks. But anyways, enough League history lesson. The main thing is this item's still really strong. It's 114% efficient, even without its crippling effect, which is really nice. So it's going to slow the attack speed, and there's a lot of attack speed champions out there right now, especially in solo queue. And so slowing that attack speed is very, very good. But yeah, I mean, these are all stats that Pyke would love, right? 100 armor, love it. It's great. 20% CDR, very important, very powerful on Pyke because he's going to get mobility boots. So he's going to be short on the CDR. And you want that CDR as fast as possible. You want the ult up at all times. You know, you want more hooks. You want more E's. He has very, very powerful cooldowns, but they're all kind of long. And so being able to reduce that is nice. Because reducing cooldown on a champion that has, you know, like a base cooldown of 15 on an ability is much more powerful than reducing the cooldown on a champion that has like 5 seconds on an ability, right? Like a Sona or a Soraka or something like that. Like CDR is okay on those champs and you'll get it, but it's especially important on the champions with longer cooldowns, which are typically tanks. And so, really nice. Having the extra mana is also very good, you know. Your ult resets don't cost mana. I thought they did a couple of patches ago when I was talking about it. The resets are actually free. But still, you know, being able to cast a lot of hooks, more E's, like zip around the map with your W without running out of mana, it's very helpful. So the 400 mana is useful. And then, of course, the cripple is nice. You're going to be up in their face really close to them whenever you engage in with your E. And so slowing their attack speed is very nice. I'm not going to get into all the math of the cripple, but it's very powerful because it affects their base attack speed. And then after the cripple applies first, and then they get the extra attack speed from whatever they have. So if they have, I guess I'll do some quick math. If they have, like, let's say a 1.0 attack speed, right? And you apply this cripple to them, and let's say they have 50% increased attack speed. You apply this cripple to them, so that's going to take it down to 85, and then they get the 50%. So then they're only getting 42.5% bonus extra attack speed, whereas if this cripple wasn't there, they would be getting 50 extra attack speed. So it not only slows their attack speed, it's almost like a double slow, because it hits their base numbers, So it doesn't cancel it out, is what I'm saying. So this 15% attack speed is not the same thing as canceling out an increase of 15 attack speed. It's much more powerful than that because it applies first to the base. You can actually click on cripple, you know, well, maybe not. But if you can look on the wiki and it'll explain it mathematically for you. But that's basically the gist. It's a lot more powerful than you think it is kind of the bottom line. So that's a really strong item on him. I do think you can go Knight's Vow. I might actually go ahead and write that in here. After that, because it still does give you a lot of armor, and then the health converts over to AD in the mid-game, which is nice. Spirit Visage, if they do have an AP threat, like if they have a really big AP threat, Spirit Visage is very nice. Because it gives you, you know, a lot of magic resist, and the 30% extra healing is a big deal with his passive. So that's kind of the greedy item that is very good, but Knight's Vow is a really nice team player item. So I guess I'd probably rather go Vow most of the time. So yeah, I think that Pyke is really good. You know, he can definitely snowball really hard. He gets a lot of extra gold that other supports don't. With his ults, that means he can afford sort of those mid-range items, those like 2,500 to 2,800 gold items that are really tough for a lot of other tank supports to afford. He can buy that. You know, one really underestimated aspect of him is he can ward extremely safely. He's one of the best warders in the game because you can actually drop wards while you're invisible with your W and it doesn't reveal you. You can't sweep. If you sweep while you're invisible, it will reveal you, but you can ward. So you can go into the enemy jungle with your W when you have mobility boots on, zip right into their jungle, drop those wards, and zip right back out. They won't even see that you placed them unless they happen to have a ward in that bush. And if their jungler is just sitting right there, or their support sitting there, like rotating, or like, you know, trying to wait for somebody to get a gank off or something, then they're probably not going to see you. And if they do see you, you can still run away with your E. You can like zip over walls. So you have like this free dash over a wall, or, you know, just zipping away that also stuns people if they try to chase you, and you can roll up invisible and have extra movement speed and drop wards while you're speeded up, while you're sped up, I guess, and invisible. I mean, he's just a warding machine. So, you know, whereas it might be too dangerous to walk into the enemy jungle and get some deep wards if you're Soraka, for example, with no vision of the enemy or priority in your lanes, or without someone to help you, you can easily do that as Pyke most of the time. So I think that makes him really handy. And then obviously you can get around enemy wards if you're going for ganks and things like that with your W. He's got a lot of perks that people just don't realize that often. So he does take a bit of getting used to. I don't personally have a super high win rate on Pyke. He does, you know, he does have a learning curve to him, but if you master him, he is very good. I will say they are talking about nerfing him on the next patch, so be careful if you want to drop, you know, like 50 games on Pyke this patch to try to, like, you know, get strong going into the final run of the season here. I would be careful. I don't know what they're saying they're going to nerf about him, but I assume it's something about his passive, probably his healing. So we'll see. But right now, he is very strong. He does have the kind of kit that can still be strong if they don't completely, like, gut his passive healing. So I do think he is quite a strong champ, even though the statistics don't reflect it right now in solo queue. Alright, we'll move on faster. I don't want this to take forever, but I do like to spend a lot of time on the first few picks, because I get asked about this a lot on stream. Like, hey, why are you doing this new Rakan build? Hey, why are you doing this different Pyke build? Why are you doing tank Pyke? And I always like to refer people to the tier list. Say, hey, I can give you like a 30-second explanation while I'm in a game here, but if you want the details, go check out the tier list. Okay, Thresh. Thresh has risen back to prominence a lot lately. He did receive a couple of really big buffs. We'll see if we can get the Thresh page here. No, not going to give it to us. Okay, let me see here. This website... it's just really squirrely with my browser or something. I don't know what's up with it. But yeah, he did get a couple of pretty big buffs here. So, mana cost reduced on Death Sentence in 819 is a really big deal. That means you can throw a lot more of those and not run out of mana, which is super handy. And at level 1, it's 4 seconds lower on the cooldown. Oops. So that's a very big deal. Super handy on Thresh. Throw more hooks. You're going to have less vulnerability when you do that. And then Dark Passage, just a few patches ago, they really buffed too, which doesn't seem like much, but this is a really big deal also. It's 4 seconds off if you max this. Most people are maxing the second now. Typically, you'll just go 1 point of Flay in the laning phase, and then you max your hook. And then I would, in the mid-game, max this Dark Passage. You get a lot of extra shielding out of it. It goes up to like a 220 base, and then an extra 1 per soul that you have, which is really handy. And then, so now you have a fairly short cooldown hook. Don't forget that if you actually hit someone with this hook, it gets reduced by a flat 3 seconds as well. So 12 seconds looks like it's a lot longer than Pyke's, but if you both have, let's just say 50% CDR for easy math, even though you can't get that much, that would take his down to 4 seconds. It would take Thresh's down to 6 seconds, but if you hit the hook, then Thresh's would go down to 3 seconds. Now, even if you hook a minion or something, it still counts as hitting the hook to reduce the cooldown. So it is a pretty low cooldown hook, and it's a pretty powerful hook. I mean, it's a 1.5 seconds of CC, even if you don't follow it up, which is really, really nice. Obviously, if you do follow it up and flay them, then it's going to be even better. But yeah, basically it has this shield, which is really powerful. It shields you and an ally for 220 with, you know, an additional 1 per soul. In the mid-game, you're going to have at least 50 souls, probably more than that. So that's like a 270 shield that ends up being on a 12-second cooldown. I mean, that's like more than a Janna shield. Quite a bit more than a Janna shield on a marginally less cooldown. If you want to think of it in that way, just straight up the shield that you throw on them, right? Not including the shield that you can also give yourself if you touch it as well. And basically the free flash that you give somebody, right? So you can lantern people in, you know, to come in for ganks. You can lantern people away to pull them out of tough situations. You can lantern just to reposition. Olaf's running at your AD carry. You can't CC him. Okay, just spread out a little bit, throw a lantern to him, then they can just lantern, you know, zip over to where you are and just continue auto-attacking him. You know? So it's got a lot of uses. It's really powerful. Nice shield on it, nice hooks, nice cooldown. He has pretty high base damages on his Q and on his ult. I think his ult does like 250 base damage or something like that, and the Q does quite a bit as well. It's like 250 when you max it out. So he has some pretty high base damages, and then of course the more souls that he gets when he auto attacks with his Flay, he gets extra damage on that. So, and he gets a lot of armor over time. He is still on the squishy side early. People don't realize that. He has super low base armor, and I think it's like 28, which is like Janna level base armor, and he gets no armor per level, but he does get souls over time. And those souls give him extra armor, and they give him extra AP, which is kind of weird, but because, I mean, I guess some of his, some of his abilities still have AP, but, you know, that's a little awkward, but he's just really strong. I mean, he's one of the best well-rounded champions in League, so he's got a hook on a fairly low cooldown. It's got a lot of utility to it. And sometimes if you hook the wrong champion, you do not want to bring them in. So that's a big difference between someone like Blitzcrank and Thresh also, is if you hook that Alistar, you may not want to pull him all the way into your team, right? Maybe you hook him just to CC him so that people can poke him a little bit, but you may not want to pull him into the whole team, right? If you pull him as Blitzcrank, you pull that Alistar in, and then he flash, you know, pulverizes your AD carry and bumps him back to his team. That's a big oops. And so Thresh has that versatility. You can either hook him, pull him in, you know, and then engage on him, or not. If you hit the wrong target, you know, no foul, right? You don't have to follow up. So that's handy. But yeah, he's got good offense, but he also has really good defense. You know, his Lantern allows people that are out of position to save themselves. You can use it offensively, like I mentioned a second ago. Then that Flay is so useful as well. It stops all kinds of movement. Lee Sin's trying to jump in on your AD carry, or Zach's trying to fly over a wall, or, you know, just whatever, any sort of movement that's going on. Leona is a very popular matchup, you know, right now. Thresh is very good into Leona, so Leona tries to go in, you can flay her back. You can flay back Rakan if you're fast enough and he's going in for an engage. You can flay back Alistar. So kind of the sky's the limit, you know. A lot of these champions, you can flay Pyke back if he's trying to dash in. So kind of the sky's the limit with flay a lot of the time. If you're really good with it, it's tremendously powerful as a defensive tool because it not only stops people that are kind of mid-flight, but it actually pushes them back, which is huge. So it stops them from doing whatever they're doing and pushes them back. So, super, super handy. You know, Thresh, very powerful, highest skill cap support in the game. But right now, this is one of the best times to play Thresh in a really long time. So these two buffs are really massive. And they have simultaneously nerfed a lot of champs that are very good into Thresh over time. So like Morgana and Tahm Kench have been nerfed a lot. They're not that great in solo queue right now, especially Tahm Kench under Diamond. Morgana's still like okay. But that's helped him out a ton, and they nerfed all the plus healing and shielding champs quite a bit. They've nerfed Janna a ton. Historically, Janna's pretty good into Thresh, and they've nerfed all of the other, you know, plus healing and shielding. Mikhail's, they nerfed that, so now it gives 5% less plus healing and shielding. A lot less people are getting that. That's really good against Thresh. So, a lot of his popular counters are rotating, you know, out of the game. And it's just really important to have engaged champs right now. This is a common theme that you'll see on this tier list is that, you know, you just want to be able to start fights. There's so many comps right now where you've got, you know, a jungler with almost no CC who can't start fights. You know, you've got a top laner that's like a fighter that doesn't really reliably start fights. You know, it's like a Fiora or an Irelia or a Camille or a Darius. Jax, Urgot, you know, all of these champs are not amazing at starting fights. They're okay, but that means that the support role really, you know, you really need to be starting fights a lot of the time. And that's just great overall in just kind of a skirmish clown fiesta meta. It's just like, who starts these fights? You know, you need to be the first one to get the hit on them. And damage is still really high in the game, so if you're the first one to hit, you're probably going to be able to clean them up. Yeah, and so Thresh is going to be one of the better champs at that. And so I recommend Guardian. Some people do Aftershock, and Aftershock is really good on him. But I think that Guardian with Revitalize is very nice as well, especially if you're going to be maxing your shield second. Just gives you a lot more trading power in lane. You know, Aftershock is good if you're going to be going for those like hardcore all-in, you know, flash flay, kill him type of stuff. But I feel like a lot of time with Aftershock, it almost gets wasted. Because if you hook him and then you don't go in, then you're just pretty much wasting Aftershock. So, I don't know. If you have like a really hardcore all-in lane, like a Draven, Misfortune, Jhin, something like that, then maybe Aftershock can be a bit stronger. It does shore up his early game. It does give you a lot of extra armor, and you don't have a lot of armor early on. But I think that I don't know. It's tough. I still like Guardian, though. I did try Guardian Thresh yesterday, and that is very handy, especially when you're trying to save allies from assassins. That's a huge thing. Like, Aftershock protects you, but Guardian protects your allies as well. So if there's a Fed, you know, Zed jumping on your AD carry, you drop that Lantern for, like, the 275 base shield. They also get a Guardian shield for, like, an extra 200 or something. You know, they're going to have almost a 500 shield, right? And that helps out a ton, especially if you put, like, a Knight's Vow on them as well. That's going to help out a lot. So that's partially why I like Guardian. It just feels like it's much better at helping your AD carry or whoever you throw the Lantern on survive. And then Ionian Boots, Nomad, Zeke's Vow, same combination that I'm recommending on a lot of other champs. Just really, really good for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Now Thresh, once again, like Rakan, is not going to get the full value out of Knight's Vow, but it's still going to be very strong for the reasons I talked about before. And a lot of people do get mobility boots on Thresh. That is nice, you know, for roaming around and, you know, trying to make plays that way. But I also think that just having the Ionian boots, this is what Zazel's been doing. And a lot of other Threshes are doing this as well. But just getting these Ionian boots, and the core principle here is you want 40% CDR as fast as humanly possible on a lot of these tanks, because they have really powerful cooldowns. Like Rakan, Thresh, Pyke, all of these have really really powerful cooldowns that are fairly long. Just getting to that 40% CDR off of cheap items as fast as you can do it is great. So yeah, so unless you're running around like consistently like roaming middle with mobility boots and like getting kills, then I would probably just go Ionian boots. Okay, almost done with tier 1 here, and then we'll move faster through the rest. Alright, Alistar is another one that I've kind of moved up a little bit. He is getting a higher win rate. You know, he's got 51.6, which is nice. He's seeing a lot more pro attention, and he's still going to be really strong, right? So he has really nice kill threat in the lane. Very, very reliable. Just WQ and then E once you're level 3. A lot of times, you know, if they don't flash, they're going to die. Very scary champ. And then in the, you know, obviously his roams are tremendous too with mobility boots. And then in the end game, you can pretty much start a fight whenever you want. So you do have to practice this a little bit. There's a certain range where it is challenging to do the WQ. It's like if you're too close to them, then it can actually be tough to WQ because you might Q too late and then you'll just bump them away with your W. So you kind of have to learn to get this little sweet spot where you're like almost max range on your W and then you WQ. So it's reliable in the sense that it's not a skill shot. You just like point click and it works. But at the same time, you have to be able to get that WQ off fast enough. And there is like a slight buffering to it. So it's a bit trickier than people think if you haven't played Alistar a lot. You need to get used to it on him because when you're trying to learn him, you will bump people away quite a bit. Now, one thing about Alistar is that when he goes in, he's in. You know, like, you're not getting away. So if you go in for an engage, your team doesn't follow up, or it was a bad engage, you're going to die. Or like the jungler like comes out of the brush and they were baiting you, like, you're going to die. You're not getting away. And so that is kind of the case where he's a lot stronger in higher elos because you're going to have much more coordination. People are going to follow up. But he can still be effective, you know, even at Platinum and lower. Especially if you have champions like Yasuo, you know, in particular, but other champions that can follow up really well on his knockup. I think that can be quite a powerful effect. So he's good. You know, he's got strong engage. He's pretty reliable once you get that WQ down. He's very durable, so he's great on the 0 gold economy. You know, once again, like you'll see in pro play. So he's kind of like Braum and Tom in that sense because his ult gives him so much mitigation. It's like 60% damage mitigation. And you don't need any extra scaling. You just press WQ. So his scaling is pretty light. So if you're against something like a Sona late game and she has 4 items and you have 4 items, she's oftentimes going to be a lot more powerful just because she has scaling on her abilities and you really don't. Yours is pretty much like CDR is your only real scaling. You know, a lot of times. So once you get 40% CDR, it's not getting much better than that most of the time. So you want to try to close out games quickly if you're playing Alistar. But yeah, still be a strong choice. Now, Leona is kind of like an Alistar light. Leona does a bit more damage than Alistar. And one thing that's kind of nice about Leona, she has a longer engage range with her ultimate. So she can use that ult. I think it's like 1100 range or something. It's pretty far. Yeah, it's 1200 range. And it's on a fairly short cooldown. So she has like faster and longer lasting crowd control, if that makes sense. So like with Alistar, you WQ in, right? You're going to knock them up for 1 second. You're not going to get the benefit off of the W. W technically stuns for 1 second, but if you combo it with Q, then it's not going to stun for any additional time. And then you have, I think it's like a 1 second stun if you fully charge your E, which takes an additional like couple of seconds after the knockup. So they have time to flash or dash away before you hit them with the E. Yeah, with Leona, you can, you know, get a maximum. It feels like you're chain CC'd forever. If they hit you with this for 1.5, then they Zenith Blade onto you, and then they stun you again for this, it ends up being like 2.5, almost 3 seconds. If it's like perfectly timed, it's 3 seconds of CC. And this can hit multiple people. And she does quite a bit of damage herself, because these Sunlight procs deal, you know, whatever, 50, 60 damage on a target, and it can hit multiple targets. So you go into a team fight, you hit a bunch of people with Eclipse, you hit a bunch of people with Solar Flare. You know, you're putting out a pretty decent chunk of damage. And so I think she's really good. And sort of like Alistar. Now, this is not exactly a point click, but it's pretty close. You know, you press your E on them, it's going to hook onto them. And your engage range is so far. If you hit them with the Solar Flare, even if it's just a slow, a lot of times you can still latch on with Zenith Blade and then go in and Q them to death. And then this gives you quite a bit of extra tankiness too with Eclipse. So, particularly if you pair her with Aftershock, she's really strong. Now, Leona was super oppressive early on, you know, in the season when Aftershock was, like, really strong before they nerfed it a lot. And before they nerfed Leona a couple of times. I think they nerfed her W. I can't remember. But she's still going to be great for solo queue. You just have to be aware that, like Alistar, when you go in, you're not getting out. So, you need to make sure you're not going to get ganked in the bot lane whenever you try to engage for those 2v2s. But if you're ahead, she's one of the most oppressive champs in the game for 2-on-2. You know, like one of the scariest things to face down is like a Jen Leona or like a Draven Leona after they get a kill, because she can just start a fight and you're gonna die, like, constantly. Especially if the AD carry is immobile. So if it's something like a Jinx, who's still pretty popular. Kai'Sa's fairly immobile. She can dodge with her E, but it's not as crisp as some of the other champs. Now, Lucian's pretty popular too, and Vayne, and they both have mobility. But things like Jinx, Jhin, Misfortune, like these champs are all like really easy for Leona to hit and combo with her stuff. So I think that she's very strong as well. So you could definitely give her a whirl. So as you can see, these are all hard engaged champs, and you know, one of the main reasons I mentioned that is because other roles don't have hard engage right now, and the combination of Zeke's plus Knight's Vow, which is also what you would run on Leona, is just really, really strong right now as a combination. There's a lot of AD floating around in the current meta still. You know, you're still seeing a lot of Yasuo's, a lot of Irelia's, you know, that type of stuff in the mid lane, Talon, Zed. And that's just a really nice combination there. So there are AP champs. It's not like it's as AD as it was before they nerfed lethality a few patches ago. But I think particularly after the plus healing and shielding nerfs in patch 8.12, and they've nerfed a couple of other enchanters as well. You know, when they did the shield nerf there, I think that has opened up a space for the tanks to come back in a little bit more. The hard engaged tanks. And I feel like those are very strong right now. Okay, and then tier 2, we'll move a bit faster, see if we can get this done in about an hour, even though that's that's looking optimistic at this point. But I just want to talk about kind of the shift, because this is a significant shift, I think, in the meta, to where, especially coming down the stretch here, I would just, if it's not a hard engaged champ, I would highly consider, like, you know, it needs to be a little bit lower, right, than the hard engaged champs, because these just make plays happen, they make things happen, and I think you're just going to need that down the stretch if you want to climb in this particular meta. In past metas, if you just scaled and you just got to, you know, 3 items on Janna or Sona or whatever, that was good enough a lot of the time, but right now it feels like that's not the case. Like, you need to try to snowball and get, you know, close out games as fast as you can. It's very snowbally right now. You know, if you fall behind, it's hard to get back in, especially if you don't have hard engage. So if you're just sitting there as Janna and your AD carry goes 0-3 in lane, like, it's going to be really hard to win that game. Whereas, like, with Rakan, even if you're behind in lane, you can still play around your mid laner. So maybe your AD carry goes 0-3, but your mid laner went 3-0, then you can actually roam and try to make plays around your mid laner a lot better than if you were Janna, right? Like, Janna can shield Fizz, but she can't, like, provide that hard engage CC for him to go in, right? And so I think that's just super important right now with just kind of the meta and the kinds of champions that people are picking. Okay, Nami is getting directly nerfed on this patch. That's why I brought her down a little bit. Her healing is going down significantly at later ranks. She's still going to be pretty strong. She's still going to do the same amount of damage, but she has kind of a hard matchup in a hard engage if she's not super oppressive early on. So like Rakan, Pyke, Thresh, Alistar, Leona are all like pretty decent into her if she doesn't get super far ahead early, and they are hitting her early game healing. So she's still okay. You know, you can still win. You still do have a bubble. You have a tidal wave. You have a lot of good trading early on. I think she's the best enchanter right now. You know, her win rate might go down 1 or 2%, but she'll still be like 52% win rate overall, I would imagine. And so I think she'll still be pretty strong. You just want to go the standard kind of airy mana flow band. I like going absolute focus on her just because you heal yourself up so much that you're almost always over 70%, and she scales really well at the AP that you get off of this. So I think that's really nice. And then Scorch, and then there's Bone Plating and Chrysalis after that. And then nothing too fancy. Athene's Ardent are both very good on her. I would get both of those typically. And then Redemption can also be pretty strong. So I think she's good, you know, especially if you're autofill to support. If you don't play support a lot, she's a great option. And then also, if you just have a really weak lane and you're just like, oh my god, we're going to get bulldozed. So if you're playing Vayne into Draven or something like that, and for some reason you don't want to dodge, then like her heal can help you out in the lane, although they are nerfing the heal component the most. So she's just versatile, pretty strong, and she's very good with champions like Lucian, like Vayne, who want to run people down. So you can put the E on them to help them chase people down. She has good scaling, you know, with these abilities. So if you think the game's going to go long, you just want to outscale something like an Alistar or a Leona, it's a pretty good choice. Her tidal wave is pretty good disengage. You have to do it, you know, ahead of time to block things like Alistar and Rakan, because it does have a cast time on it. Or to, like, someone was telling me, why don't you just, like, you know, Nami W, or like Nami R the Rengar that's jumping in, you know, one game. I'm like, that's really fast. Unless you know exactly where he's coming from, you're not going to be able to tidal wave fast enough to stop a Rengar jump. If he's, like, starting his jump, your R is too slow. Like, you have to do it before he starts his jump, and then he has to opt into jumping anyways into the wave. Whereas he's going so fast in his invisibility, he could easily sidestep the wave and then jump if he was a competent Rengar. But anyways, very strong, one of the best enchanters still, just getting a slight nerf, so I nudged her down just a little bit. Also, because the meta really, like, you really want to have Engage as support, because you're just not going to get it in your other lanes most of the time. And you don't necessarily have to have a tank to win in solo queue. It's nice, but you do have to have Engage. You have to have ways to start fights. And so, like, I don't know if Rakan would necessarily count as a tank, for example. But if you have a bunch of, like, bruisers and brawlers on your team, right? You've got, like, an Irelia middle, a Jax top, like a Graves jungle, and then a Kaisa or something on your team. You can make that work, right? If you have Rakan, you can make it work. Even though no one on there is properly, like, a tank, you know, you could still make it happen because you would have good engage with the Rakan. Okay, Blitzcrank is another one that I've moved up here, primarily because Engage is at a very high premium right now. And so I've pulled him out of the dregs of honorable mention up here. So nothing in particular has changed about Blitzcrank that makes him all of a sudden much better. It's just that the meta is really good right now for people who can start fights. And so it's going to be a similar build to most of the other champs on here, right? You're going to go Zeke's, Knight's Vow, and then Aftershock, Bone Plating, Chrysalis, Unflinching, and then Hex Flash and Cosmic Insight. So you do Hex Flash and Cosmic on Leona and Alistar as well. But the reason for that is you can just, you know, dash out of a bush and it just catches people off guard, and then you just throw your Engage. So you just, you know, flash out of a bush, hook somebody. It's kind of tricky. You got to practice it. If you're not used to it, you could get, like, perfect timing or something like that if you wanted to. Don't get the free boots, because you need to get mobility boots as kind of your first item a lot of times, so you can roam around and try to get a good position for a hook. But Blitz is pretty good. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that his hooks are very expensive. They're like 100 mana, and he has a super low mana pool early on. So, like, his hook, in theory, does more damage and can be more devastating than Pyke or Thresh, but it costs a lot more mana. And he has a much lower mana pool. And he doesn't have as much utility as Pyke or Thresh either. It's like his hook, he has a hook and that's it. You know, he has a very slight knock-up with his E, You know, he has a small silence with his R, but it's nowhere close to the kind of utility that Pyke and Thresh can offer with their different abilities. So, he is good. You know, you land those hooks, you are going to get a lot of kills, you know, particularly in a kill lane with, like, Draven, Jhin, Misfortune, things like that. But he is lacking a bit on the utility. So, stronger engage, in a sense, right? But a bit more one-dimensional. But he is good engage. He does do a lot of damage. He can snowball really well early. He does roam very well. So, I'll put him up there. Okay, Fiddlesticks I'm going to put as my highest AP champion right now. Fiddlesticks, you know, you pretty much win the lane most of the time. You just spam your crows on the wave. It's going to push them in. It's going to do some mild harass. You can go Comet on him, which is okay. You can also go Aftershock. Most people that play Fiddle as support at sort of the higher levels will go Aftershock. This does let you all in better. It does give you more survivability, particularly before you can get Hourglass. So on your first few ultimates, you will survive a little bit longer when you ult in and Fear. So that's helpful. But you can still go for the, you know, the Comet, Mana Flow Band, Celerity, Scorch Root if you want. Absolute Focus is actually pretty good on him too. It'll give you some extra poke. Excuse me. And you can stay above 70% pretty easily with your W. Now, Fiddle did get nerfed several times. They did nerf his E, so it does less damage. And I think they increased the mana cost as well a little bit. But he's still pretty good. With Hourglass, you know, he's very strong. So this is part of why I like Fiddle, is he can start fights, just like a lot of the other champions. If you get really good vision control and you ult in, that's a really, really powerful initiation, right? Especially once you get Hourglass. So it's really handy. So I would just go Ionian, Nomad, Hourglass, just as much CDR as you can get as fast as possible. Then I like going Twin Shadows. Some people go Shirelias if you get to that point. But he is very helpful, particularly if you have all AD comps. You know, you have an Irelia top, a Zed middle, or something like that, and you just need some AP on your team. Fiddlesticks does a ton of AP, and he has really nice CC and initiation, so I think it's great. He's particularly good against low-range AD carries, so against things like Vayne or Kai'Sa or even Lucian. All of these are pretty short range. They're under 550. I guess Vayne is technically 550 on the dot, but they're all in great sort of range to fear him. Now, one thing about Fiddle is if they get a Quicksilver Sash and they Quicksilver Sash your Fear, you're probably going to die. You're kind of screwed. Like, he has no escapes, no dashes, very little defense. So that is a thing where he's a lot more dangerous than some of the other champs. But, you know, if you need AP, if you want some engage, you want some nice hard CC, some anti-melee action, then Fiddlesticks can be very strong. You know, great against like Jax, Irelia, you know, a lot of these really powerful melee bruiser type of champs, Urgot potentially. He can be very good, so that's why I have him up there. Now, Zyra is somebody else who can be very strong, especially at gold and lower. She does tremendous poke damage. She has really high burst damage all in. You know, at pretty much all stages of the game. And they did just buff Leandries, which is really nice for her. But she's very immobile. That's one of the huge things. It's like, if you get caught out, you're going to die. And that sucks. So, like, you can win your lane, but if the jungler comes down and camps you, or even in the mid game, let's say you win your lane, and then the Fizz, you know, is 5-0, or, like, the jungler, you know, jungler Kha'Zix, who's really popular right now, gets to be, like, 6-0, you're just going to get destroyed against, like, a competent jungler. Or even, like, a Lee Sin, who's also really popular. You know, if he's able to get behind you and hit you with a Q, you know, you're dead. So, there's a lot of other, like, highly mobile champions or invisible champions. You know, Evelyn's still really popular. They are nerfing Eve next patch. There's a lot of nasty stuff out there that you just really don't want to be dealing with as a squishy support that doesn't have any escapes and has very limited CC. That's, like, pretty easy to dodge. Like, people can flash your roots You know, it's so obvious when you're going for it. You know, if Kha'Zix is running at you or something, and you know, you try to root him, he can just flash it. So she's okay. She's very good if you're left alone in the laning phase, and you know, in the mid game, if you can get bush control and catch people out of bushes and kill them, she's phenomenal. I mean, Zyra's been one of my favorite supports of all time. She's great, but it is rough right now in this meta. If we move back towards a tank meta, if people start playing tanks again in the jungle, we start seeing Sejuani's or I'm trying to think of other champs that are like tanky that aren't really like super dangerous out of the jungle. Maybe a Moomoo's. I don't know. Because it's like there's so few tanks that are running around in the jungle right now. If we start seeing more tank junglers or tank tops, you know, things like Malachi, Ornn, Sion, maybe Cho'Gath, you know, stuff like that. If it starts becoming more popular, I guess Urgot kind of fits that bill. Then she can be really good because she has like really high like burst damage, but also really nice sustain damage with those plants and Leandries and Rylai. You know, you do a lot of sustained damage, a lot of percentage health damage. Zyra routinely, if you're a good Zyra player, you'll get first or second most damage on your team. It's just the safety is the issue. So if the enemy team has a comp that like can't get to you, then she's good. If they have a comp that can get to you, it's questionable. So I just think she's a bit more vulnerable than Fiddlestick. She doesn't have as reliable of an engage. She doesn't have that fear. That fear is really nice for just escaping. If Kha'Zix is running at you, even if he flashes, you know, a lot of times you can still fear him and maybe run away, right? Particularly if you have Twin Shadows, you know, that can help you escape. But yeah, she's still good. She's still really great if you can get ahead. If you can snowball hard, it may not matter. You know, if you go out of your lane and it's like Draven, Zyra, and your team is up 40 CS in the bot lane and 5 kills, it's not gonna matter if they have a Kha'Zix at that point, probably, right? Because you're just gonna delete them and just bulldoze the rest of the map with your Draven. So if you can snowball hard enough, if you can get enough kills, Zyra can still be really strong. Now she is very good against things like Thresh in the laning phase and like Leona, right? Because they Thresh is just a huge target. It's particularly against Thresh because he's such a huge target. You can block his hook with your plants. He has no healing. It's really hard for him to trade back on you. If he does hook your AD carry and try to go in, you can just like delete him with your plants and your ultimate because he is pretty squishy early on. So, you know, she's still good. She's still good, but I brought her down just a little bit just because there's so much mobility and so much damage out there. And then finally in Tier 2 we have Sona. I moved Sona up a little bit because Nami went down a little bit. Sona is probably one of the highest scaling supports. If you get to 3 items, if you get your Ardent Censer, Athene's plus Redemption, you're pretty much never going to lose a team fight. If it's an actual proper 5-on-5 that lasts longer than 5 seconds, you're just going to win. If you get off like 2 W's in a fight and your Redemption lands, most teams just won't have enough damage to clean you up. So if you do have tanks on your team, you know, if you do have an Urgot top and you have... I don't know, like a Sejuani jungle or something like that, then you can still be really strong. Or you have like a Galio middle. If you have at least like 1 tank, preferably 2, then Sona's very strong. And the reason tanks are important is because the plus healing and shielding has a greater effect on tanks than squishy champions. You know, if you're healing a champion that has 200 armor, that's going to be much more effective than healing a champion that only has, you know, 50 armor, for example. So how that works is, let's say you heal somebody for 100, right? If you have 200 armor, it's going to take 300 damage to counteract that 100 heal because it's going to have to go through all of that armor to do that amount of damage. Versus if you only have 50 armor, then it's going to take 150 damage to cut through that healing, that 100 healing, right? And so anytime you have more resistances, then healing and shielding becomes a lot stronger. Sona also was not touched by the nerfs to plus healing and shielding, particularly because of her itemization. Because she likes to get Ardent Censer and Athene's before she gets Redemption, then that extra 2% loss on redemption is not going to matter as much. And her shield didn't get reduced, her healing didn't get reduced. So kind of like Nami, she really wasn't affected by the changes in 8-12. And she has a really good win rate too right now. She's like 53%, I think. Yeah, let me close this door. You might be able to hear my wife's music or whatever she's playing over there. She's packing up stuff in the other room. But yeah, I think she, you know, stands to rise up a little bit just because Nami's fallen down. Now, keep in mind that these are rough matchups. Like, all 5 of these are pretty tough early on into Sona. So you need to be very careful that, kind of like Zyra, you don't have a lot of escapes. And you can get obliterated, you know, by Kha'Zix or, you know, Thresh, Pyke, Rakan. All of these champs, you know, have huge kill threat on you. So you need to be careful. Now, she does have some pretty good CC if her ult's up, right? It's like a 1.5 AoE CC. And she, you know, can speed herself up, and she has her green shot to kind of lower your damage a little bit. So she has some tools, but it is still going to be fairly limited. Okay, tier 3. Lulu moved down just a little bit here. Don't really have an amazing reason for that. I mean, I think that she is good. It's just, she's very immobile. Like, I think that's a huge thing. Like, she does have some assassin protection with her ult and with her polymorph, which are both very strong. It's always kind of hard for me to figure out where to put Lulu because I feel like she can be really good, like, when she's good in the right situations. She doesn't have a very high win rate. Yeah, she's sitting at about 48%. And, I mean, the thing that always come back to with Lulu is, like, her polymorph is so good, but that's, like, the only part of her kit that's really that amazing. Like, the rest of it's, like, okay. You know, like, her Q is not that great. Like, it can push lanes early. It does provide a small slow. It doesn't do a lot. The W is amazing because that can give your AD carry extra attack speed, extra move speed, or it can polymorph, like, it can basically stun somebody for almost 2.5 seconds on 1 point quick ability. That's really strong. And her shield is also kind of lackluster, especially after the nerf. It's a pretty low base value. It only goes to like 210. Her ranges are very low too. That's important to keep in mind. So if you look at Lulu, like, her shield range is only 650. This is kind of a problem with Sona too, is her range is so low. Like, the aura range is like 450 on Sona. The heal, like, goes pretty far, like 1,000. But, like, the shield portion of it is only like 450. So that's kind of rough too. But, like, Pyke's here is 650. Like, Janna's shield is 800. And so Janna can play much further back. Like, Nami's wave, I think, is 750. And so this is pretty close. Like, you have to get pretty close to the action. It's not a heal, so it doesn't heal people. The shield is kind of anemic. It's only 210 with 60. The damage is kind of anemic. It's only a 0.4 ratio with 200. Now, it is flexible, but it only lasts for 2.5 seconds now. It does give True Sight, which is relevant against things like Twitch and Vayne, if you put it on them. She does have a pretty low cooldown ult, which is really handy. Gives bonus health, a slow, a knock-up. So that is very good. But it's really these two abilities, like Whimsy primarily, and then her ult are really her, like, two, like, marquee abilities. And this is so good. I mean, this is one of the most powerful support abilities in the game. The problem is it's on the same ability. So you have to choose. Do you polymorph or do you boost up your AD carry? Now, if they would switch this up a little bit and give, like, this bonus attack speed to her shield, where when she has the shield on him, this would make a lot more sense to me. And I think that would make Lulu a lot more viable. Like, she's viable, but it would just make sense thematically. And that would just help out so much. Because this is what puts picks on them. Right? So that means that when you get that extra attack speed, it's really handy to have picks on them so that they get that extra, you know, on-hit damage. And that's where she really shines, is with these champions that get a lot of attack speed and that get these on-hit builds. So, like, with Kai'Sa, Vayne, Twitch, even Jinx to an extent. This is very nice. It's a lot of extra on-hit damage. mean, you're talking like in the mid game, like 60 on hit damage every time they auto. That's a lot. You know, that's a lot of damage. So she has a nice passive. You know, Whimsy's good, Wild Growth is good. It's just there's too much on her W, right? Like, that's the movement speed for your ally. That's the polymorph duration. That's all of this stuff. I wish it was, like, just poly, you know? Like, I don't know. The movement speed is nice. Like, I would say make it just poly or the movement speed. Like, both of those. But if you shield them, then the person that you shield gets the attack speed, even if they don't get the movement speed. And so this would still be like a decent choice. Do I want to put this on the Hecarim that's initiating, or do I want to save it to polymorph their assassin? It's just the problem is, like I said, right now it's got 3 different modes. You know, you can put it on your bruiser to help them stick to the enemy. But they're not going to benefit that much from attack speed if you do that. A little bit, but not a lot, typically, with the kinds of champions you're going to have, like, that you're speeding up. Or the polymorph for 2.25. Or do you put it on your AD carry to give them the extra attack speed? So, just too many good things on one ability, I think, is Lulu's problem. So, she can be very good in the right situations, but I feel like it's just her Q and her E are just so weak. Like, there's just not a good second thing to level up compared to some of the other supports out there. And she's just very slow, has low base stats, doesn't have a heal. But, you know, I think that I've done this some. I haven't tried it a lot. I think, you know, maybe something like Zeke's might be worth experimenting with her, because she does have a super low cooldown ult, 110 seconds, and you can use that proactively. You can use your Zeke's, you know, on the your bruiser that's running in. You can use the Zeke's, you know, buff them up, and then that'll give your AD carry that extra on-hit damage. So I think going something like a Zeke's Ardent Sensor build may not be terrible on her. Another thing about her that's sort of like iffy compared to some other champs is she doesn't scale very well with plus healing and shielding, because her ult doesn't count as a heal. It's an infusion of health. So that gets around Ignite, you still get the full heal on it, and that's good, but it doesn't gain anything from like Redemption or, you know, Mikhail's Ardent Sensor, that type of stuff. It doesn't get any benefit off of that. And her like AP scaling is really low. You know, her ult only has a 0.5. Her E shield has a 0.6. Virtually nothing on her W. Her Q is very anemic. And that's by design, because they don't want mid Lulu to be too strong. So the AP scaling is pretty lackluster on her. So I haven't tried it out. I've done it, like I said, a couple of times. But I could definitely see where doing like Zeke's and Ardent could be good. Now, I'm not sure. It would depend on the situation where you would get which one. But I could definitely see that being helpful. It would help your problem of being kind of squishy early on. It would give some extra damage to your AD carry, which does scale very well if you end up whimsying your AD carry. So if you put whimsy on them, and you have Ardent Sensor, and you have Zeke's, and you have your passive, like, that's a lot of damage that you're, you know, boosting your AD carry with. So I think it's definitely something worth exploring. Because, like I said, Redemption just feels bad. I've tried Athene's on her too, which is like, it's okay. It does give you a little bit extra healing, but I just don't think you do enough damage in the mid game, because your Q and your E just really don't scale that much. You end up maxing Whimsy, so you don't do enough damage to really make the Athene's healing like that fantastic. So yeah, I would need to experiment a little bit more. You know, she has a 48% win rate, like I said before. With top-end people playing her, it's 53%. You know, a lot of them are just getting sort of Ardent Sensor. A lot of them are playing her mid lane, though. But I think Zeke's is something that's potentially really unexplored. Now, she doesn't really apply that slow, like the melee where you get in close and it does the extra damage. She's not going to do that a ton. But buffing up your ally, giving you a little bit of extra resistances. I think there's a way to make Lulu better than people currently play her. I think people aren't optimizing her well enough. And I think it might involve doing something like Ardent into Zeke's, or Zeke's into Ardent maybe. But I have to experiment to see, you know, to try that out a little bit more. Okay, Morgana's another one, and we need to go ahead and end this. I don't want this to be too long. Morgana, same stuff. You know, a lot of people still go Airy on her. It's okay. You know, I do think that Unsealed Spellbook could be good on her just because Airy's not that great because you only have one ability that can put it on your ally, and it's a pretty long cooldown with your Black Shield. So Airy's like alright, but she just doesn't do anything, really. Like, you can throw Qs in the laning phase. You do have your Black Shield, which is nice. Your W can kind of push the lane, although they've nerfed that some. So she's okay. You know, with Unsealed, that would give you a chance to, you know, have some more summoners, maybe try to make some more plays in the mid-game. You know, you're primarily picking her as a defensive pick against things like Pyke and Thresh, which is nice, but then you have limited tools. Like, they have ways they can get around that, and you have limited tools to... offensive tools, I should say. So, you know, she's okay. If you want to pick an anti-Pyke or Thresh champ and you don't want to play Pyke or Thresh yourself, then she's a pretty decent choice, but she's a little too reactive in my mind. I want to play something more proactive in this meta. Similarly with Janna, she can still be very good if you get to 3 items, but she can definitely get bullied out early. Her shield is absolutely disgustingly bad early on now. It's like an 18-second cooldown. It starts decaying immediately when you cast it. It already has a fairly low value. Like, they over-nerfed her. It's just gross. Like, just take the AD off of her shield and just stop the decay and just make it a reasonable cooldown early on. Like, they did everything in their power to let her keep her AD on her shield, which has always been this secret power spike that a lot of people don't even pay attention to. It's hidden power. If the shield breaks, you lose the AD anyways. Like, because having that AD encourages you to, like, not use the shield to block damage. You just basically put the shield on your AD carry so they get extra AD, and then a lot of times the shield doesn't even break. Like, no one even hits the AD carry. So it's just a really poor champion design from, like, Season 1. It's just bizarre. It's just like a random stat. Hey, let's give her something extra. Okay, how about AD? It doesn't even make sense thematically. She's like this wind champion that puts shields on people and is, like, supposed to heal them, and she randomly gives them attack damage with her shield. It's like, why? Why is that a thing? So, I don't know. So, I think they should have just buffed that a long time ago. It's a very powerful stat. Giving 40 extra AD to, like, an AD carry in the mid-game is massively powerful. So, it's very good. It just is weird, and that is forcing them to nerf other stuff about her kit that does work thematically. So, the shield blocking damage, you having extra movement speed off of your W, all of this stuff, like, makes sense for a wind champion. Pushing people away with, like, your tornado and your ultimate, all of this makes sense. But they've nerfed all of that stuff at the expense of letting her keep the AD bonus on her shield, which is so difficult to balance around anyways and doesn't even make any sense. So if I was on the balance team, I would just take that AD off of her shield, or at least lower it a lot, and then, like, give her back some of her other power. Make her tornado move at a fast speed again. It doesn't have to CC people for a long time. You know, just that quarter of a second or whatever it does is fine, but, like, make it fast so that you can actually peel with it. Because right now, you can't peel with it. It's so slow, Leona still gets on the target half the time, you know. All of these other champs are still going to get in range to where they're very dangerous. So make it a fast tornado again. Lower her shield cooldown, at least to, like, 14 seconds at level 1. If not, taking it all the way back down to 10 seconds. But, like, 14 at level 1 would be fine. If it went, like, you know, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. That would be fine. Goes down 1 second per. Starts at 14. And then just get rid of the decay crap. Like, why decay? I don't know. It just seems really bad. So, Janna's not in a great spot. She does have a good win rate. It just, you know, as someone who's played Janna for years, a lot of Janna, she feels a lot worse today than she has in the past. And she still has a 51% win rate, so it's okay. It's not like she needs major adjustments, but that's what I would like to see. Okay, Braum, very good in pro play, mediocre in solo queue. He's okay, you know, he does block a lot. He's very good against things like Misfortune and Jinx, but my whole thing is he can't really start fights, right? Like, you can ult and maybe hit people or flash ult. Like, it's okay. If you have a good team fight comp, if you have someone else on your team who can start the fight and then he can jump on them and then ult. So if you have something like a Sejuani on your team or an Amumu and then he can jump in there, ult, get the fight going, and throw up his shield, like, he can do pretty well. But his problem is, like, he doesn't do that well into assassins, who are melee in particular, so he's not going to do a lot about Jax jumping on top of your AD carry, unless your ult's ready and you happen to hit him with your ult. You know, because those charges or whatever take a while, or like an Irelia jumping onto your AD carry, you know, the shield's not going to do a lot about that. And it takes a long time to stun them if you don't have your ult, right? So you have to get those 4... Your allies can help with the auto attacks, obviously, but it takes a little bit. And when, you know, Rengar, Kha'Zix, Irelia, Jax are just deleting your AD carry in like under 1 second, or like a really fed Shaco, just any number of things, Fizz, all these champs are just like deleting your AD carry, you just may not have time to get that charge off. So he's okay. You know, you can still make him work, especially if you have a lot of auto attack based champions to help trigger his passive. But I think that overall, you know, he can still have some problems. And then finally, Nautilus is someone that I've added on here. He has been seeing some pro play recently with how powerful engaged champions are right now. I think it's useful to mention him. So I did play Nautilus a lot in Season 6. I think he was my second or third most played champ, and he was my highest win rate champ. They have given him some buffs over time. I've already got him pulled up here. So they did give him some buffs. I think this season, it's not going to show us the history, but I know they lowered the cooldown on his ult, which was a big deal, by like 10 or 20 seconds. And so that's really handy, you know, 120-second ult cooldown. It does work very well with Zeke's, because you're going to be holding them still. Obviously, you're going to be standing in their face, trying to auto-attack, trying to spam your E. So you are going to get that extra damage. You are going to get that CC off of the Zeke's. He does work very well with Knight's Vow. He does actually count as a melee champion, unlike Rakan and Thresh. So that is really handy. He can get the full benefit out of Knight's Vow. You know, this can CC multiple targets too in a fight. So if you press it on the back line, it'll knock up all of the front line as well for some extra knock-up, some extra damage. And that's a long CC. I mean, it knocks them up for 1 second, and then at level 11, that's an extra 1.5 seconds. That's 2.5 seconds of CC on your primary target. And this is very good against mobility, too, because they can't dodge it. So, like, Lucian or Vayne or Kai'Sa, if they try to get cute, you know, and think they can, like, roll to the side of this, it's not happening. Now, it is kind of slow, so they do have time to, like, get a decent amount away. So, if they have a strong front line that can still block, then, you know, maybe that can work, but it's very nice for picking people off. Riptide still does decent damage. I mean, single target, you can do up to 350 damage. It does cost quite a bit of mana at the end. Zeke's does help with that a little bit, but it does cost a lot of mana to spam this, but you can wave clear with it pretty well. They did change his shield around, so they lowered the amount of the shield, but I think they increased the length that it lasts. I know they lowered the cooldown. It used to be 18 seconds. So now you can spam it more, which is okay. It's still kind of a dinky shield. It's an okay 1-point wonder. You know, you get 100 plus 9% of your max health. So in the early game, that might be an extra 90. Late game, maybe 180. Or, yeah, 180. So you'd get to 280 shield on a 12-second cooldown. So it's okay. And then they did change Dredge Line as well, to where now it's on a lower cooldown, and you get 50% cooldown reduction if you hit terrain, and you get mana cost. So this does actually give you a bit of an escape. So you know, when you go in, you're probably not going to have this up to escape, right? So if you go in, it's on a 10-second cooldown. You have 40% CDR. It's still going to be 6 seconds before you can cast this again to get out. So if you go in and then you get counter ganked or it looks bad, you're still not getting out. although you can rotate around the map with this somewhat. Now keep in mind this does not go over walls, so you cannot hook people through walls. This is historically why I have rated him a bit lower than something like a Thresh or a Pyke or a Rakan, is because you can't go over walls. So if you're trying to ward in a jungle and you get caught out, you're probably going to die. If you're in the river and you see a really juicy opportunity to hook somebody, you know, over the pit, it's not happening. So that is a little awkward. If they change this and they allowed you to hook people over the pit and they just remove this terrain mechanic, I think he would be a lot stronger, a lot stronger. But as it currently stands, you know, the fact that walls block the hook is iffy. This can also get kind of weird in the laning phase where if you try to hook somebody and they flash your hook or they dash and dodge it and you accidentally hook the wall or hook a tower or something like that that's near the tower and they CC you, you'll die. That's really weird. That's happened to me a couple of times. It's not a fun experience. So that can be a little awkward as well. Or if they have something like a Trundle pillar or like an Anivia wall or like a Jarvan wall, like there are some instances where that can get kind of weird. But that, you know, given that, it is still a really powerful hook. This is probably the best open field hook. So if you're just sitting there, like, looking at the enemy team, you know, A-ramming middle, like, this is a very good hook. It has a huge hitbox. It's a really low mana cost of only 60, and it's on a pretty low cooldown compared to a lot of other hooks out there. So you can spam this, but the biggest thing is it's fast. It's like, boom, there goes the hook, and it's a huge skill shot. So that's really nice. It's akin to like a Blitz hook, where it's like virtually instant, and it's a big hitbox. I'm pretty sure it's even bigger hitbox than like Blitz's hook. And this is different from Thresh, which has a very slender hitbox, and it has a pretty long wind-up time. It has like half a second is what it feels like before he throws it. And so that's really awkward where you can't do it a lot of times, or it's more difficult if you're sitting there looking at them, right? You have to come up with all these ways to try to fake them out to get it to work. Or Pyke, where you have to charge it up for a half a second before you can throw it, right? So that's one of the big differences between him and other hook champions, is that it kind of sucks that it can't go over walls, but at the same time, if you're just A-ramming or you're just looking at him right in the face, then you can hook him. It also has a really long range. I think that Thresh and Pyke are also about 1100. They might be slightly shorter. But it is a really nice fat hook that's almost instant. So it's going to have a much higher probability of hitting people if you're sitting there looking at him. Most of the time. So he's okay, you know. I think the fact that it doesn't go over walls definitely hurts him, but it's a really good open field hook. Has a pretty low mana cost, pretty respectable damage. You know, he does have CC on his autos. It's not a lot. It only roots the target for like a little bit, you know, 0.5 seconds or whatever. But, you know, pretty decent little root that he can auto attack people with. An okay little shield, pretty good wave clear, which is great for solo queue. Pretty good AoE damage in team fights. If you get that Zeke's going, remember it's going to hit everybody around you for that amount. Riptide's going to be slowing people, doing a lot of damage. Depth charge, pretty good. So, like, the change to Aftershock and, like, the power of Zeke's right now is definitely worth something exploring, you know, with him. And the lowered cooldown on this, you know, the fact you can knock up multiple people now and do pretty good damage. I mean, you know, 325 in the mid game is pretty nice. So he's worth exploring. I mean, he could be as high as tier 2 right now. You know, there might be some instances where I'd rather take him over Thresh, or over maybe not Thresh, but maybe Thresh sometimes, but maybe over Blitzcrank. I would just have to test it out and see how it feels. But I think that he has the potential to be moving up a little bit here. Okay, and that's going to be a really long video, but a lot of stuff has changed. This is one of the biggest sort of mix-ups for me in a while, and a lot of this is just kind of meta-dependent here, and why a lot of this has changed. So, honorable mentions. Brand, still okay. You know, if you're gold and lower, he can work. I would just rather play Zyra or Fiddle. You know, he just has kind of mana issues early on, potentially. Doesn't have a lot of CC. You know, if you do hit your stun, it's great, but, like, in a team fight, you're only going to be hitting, you know, one person potentially with a stun, whereas Zyra can knock up or root the whole team with her E and her R. So, he's alright. Soraka can still be good. I know this is going to hurt a lot of people to see her as an honorable mention. She does still have a pretty good win rate, I think. Yeah, she's got 51.5% win rate, so based on just win rates, she's still doing okay. Just I played her a couple of times in this patch. It just feels really rough. You know, with Kha'Zix running around, Fizz, Kassadin, Lee Sin. Like, there's so many mobile champions that can just get on you and kill you. And I'd probably rather just play Sona. I just feel like Sona at least has that AoE CC for team fights, which is nice. And she has sort of the AoE shielding, healing, all of that stuff. And she synergizes so well with Athene's Unholy Grail and Ardent Censer that if you want to play the healer that scales, I'd rather play that. I mean, I know Soraka can be good in the laning phase, right? If you land a lot of Qs, with your E and stuff like that. But I think that the nerf to all of the plus healing and shielding items, the Mikhails, the Redemptions, that's really what Soraka wants to be buying. And all that stuff got nerfed really hard. Whereas, like, Athene's got buffed that Sona uses, and Ardent Censer barely got touched. I mean, the main power of it is the buff itself, which did not get touched in a while. The extra 2% you lose off plus healing and shielding is really secondary on that item. So, I think that Sona is a better version of what Soraka's trying to do right now. Shen is okay. I mean, you will see him in pro play sometimes. It just requires a lot of coordination. His ult is awkward. He doesn't use Zeke's very well because of that, because it has a really long cooldown. But yeah, he's okay. I mean, he does have a dash, so you can, like, jump over walls and things like that, which is handy. But, I'd just rather play some of the other tanks on the list. Tahm Kench is okay. He's been nerfed a ton. In solo queue, it's really rough. Under Diamond, I probably wouldn't do it. It just feels really awkward. You're just going to get completely beat down by most of the harass supports in the laning phase. Like, you can save people from a Pyke or a Thresh hook, but that's it. You're just completely reliant on your team to do everything, pretty much. Like, you can rotate with them if your team knows how to, like, take your ultimate, which I'm kind of being sarcastic about that, but kind of not. Like, some people just literally will not take your ult, or they don't even know what it does, especially if you're going down to, like, silver and bronze. And so, I just think he's a little bit too team reliant right now. So if you're like, a pro player playing at Worlds right now, he's probably still pretty good. But other than that, I think it's rough. Bard is okay. He has some harass early. I just feel like he's just going to get murdered by these top tier champs if they ever engage on him. Like, he does have the potential to out harass him, and like Nami being nerfed like on this patch does help him out because she was one of his main adversaries in lane. Because she can just heal through his harass. But you're just having to work so hard as Bard to just do the same thing that some of these other champs can do. It's just really dangerous to leave your AD carry also to go collect those chimes. Like, there's a lot of reasons why Bard is, like, okay, he's fun, but he's really dangerous as well. They did give him a buff, I think, on his ult recently, which was nice, but his itemization is still really awkward as well. And his runing. So, he's alright. But I would only recommend playing him if you just really love the champion and just really love playing him. Karma's okay. They are thinking about buffing or reworking her soon, so we'll kind of see how that goes. But right now, it's just rough. Like, she does have some early game harass, but her scaling is kind of abysmal. They nerfed her shielding quite a lot. She doesn't have hard CC, really. Like, you have to sit close to someone to get that root. She's okay. I just feel like there are a lot better champions. If you like playing Karma, I'd recommend just like Sona, Lulu, or Nami, something like that if you want an early pressure champ that scales a little bit better. Taric is okay. I've seen him like a couple of times. Like in solo queue, it's really hard to coordinate with his ult. They nerfed him really hard in the mid-season, unfairly I should say. They took like 50 damage off of his E. They like increased his ult cooldown by like 20 seconds or just something insane like that. So he's alright, but it's just, once again, like the runes are pretty bad on him. You can take Guardian, I guess, but he really kind of needs Tear of the Goddess. Like, he doesn't use Zeke's that well because his ult's on such a long cooldown. He just really doesn't use a lot of the really good runes and items right now. It's just kind of awkward. But, he can be effective in theory. Zillion, same deal. Not great runes, not great items. But he can work. If you consistently land your double bombs, it can be good. You know, he has some nice anti-assassin, anti-engage. So, like, his ult is pretty good against these types of champs, right? Alistar goes in, Leona goes in to try to kill your AD carry. You know, you ult him, save him, and then reset. They can be okay, but I feel like a lot of times he just seems very ineffective in a lot of games. Veigar, he's okay. He does have a stun. Like, the cage, you know, is pretty good in team fights. He can get quite a bit of AP if you land a lot of your Qs in lane, but if he gets engaged on, he can just get completely deleted. And if the enemy team gets a Quicksilver Sash, or their support gets them a Kales, like, it can be really, really rough if they can get around your cage. And then Vel'Koz is just like, okay, he has decent harass. You know, that's it. Pretty much. He has decent harass. People have been trying out the new, you know, whatever, that slow build with him, where you'd get something like a Twin Shadows and, you know, run Glacial Augment. I think it's a pretty troll build. I know Fiddle was popularizing that. There's been a couple of pro players that have done it, but I think it's really gimmicky, and there are probably better choices out there. If you want to play AP, I'd rather play something with better engage, like a Fiddlesticks. Okay, but that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. I know this was one of the longer ones I've done in a while. Sorry about that. But I really did want to talk about some of these changes, because I know people will be asking, well, why am I playing Rakan a lot lately? Why does Pyke build this way? Why is Thresh so much more popular right now? Like, why Leona and Alistar? So I just wanted to kind of talk about that meta shift and sort of what's going on. And a lot of it has to do with these champions use Zeke's and Knight's Vow very well, and that the meta, you know, is really, it's optimal if you have a hard engage support right now. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, so that other people can help find it. And I'll see you next time. Have a great day.